so quickly and appreciating the time pressure to get through this afternoon. But our next session, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Stephanie Burns to the group. I've known Stephanie for probably 10, 15 years and met her early in my consulting career when I was given a portfolio of learning development for a small consulting house I was working for, and I was coming across a number of L&D zealots in different corporates who all were telling me that learning was only good if people were really happy, and they filled out the smile sheet saying they were happy where they were there, and that we got good attendance. And fortunately, I came across Stephanie, who's a very unique person, very intelligent, very experienced, who said, no, actually learning's really hard, and learning takes effort, and we have to understand adult learning principles. The second thing that Stephanie's going to talk to us about is really human motivation and goal achievement. And just an ironic story for you, as I reconnected with Stephanie to join summer school by email, and we were talking about meeting. The meeting was going to be held in Manly because that's close to where she lives, and I was going to be up in Sydney for the day. And I started to convince myself about how hard it was going to be to go meet her. That was going to be hard to get in the Circular Quay from our office. I had to take a ferry. This was going to disrupt my day. So how ironic is it that I was convincing myself to not achieve my goal when I was going to meet an expert in goal achievement? So I stopped myself, had a laugh, and said, go do it. And it was absolutely no effort at all. It was just my brain working the way it works sometimes that blocks us from achieving our goals. So I have a great admiration for this person. I'm really delighted she's here today. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie to the stage.
Yes, if Amy actually hadn't caught herself doing that, I wouldn't be here today. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I've got an hour and a half, minus whatever we have till 5 to 5, to work with you and talk with you about something that was brought to my attention, not only in your industry, but in a lot of industries I work with. And that's this whole notion of how do we manage our performance behavior. We're competent on our jobs. We know how to do what we do. You clearly produce results, or you wouldn't be in the positions you are, have the jobs that you have. But the game becomes then, how do we manage our improvement over time? And we've got a few things that we need to think about there. And can I get the mic down just a little bit? It's just a bit ringy for me. One, how is it that we take our existing practice, the things we know how to do, and polish them up so that we do them in an improved way? Second big issue we have is, how do we take newly acquired behaviors, things, for example, that you'll be learning here at summer school. How do you adopt new behaviors and put them into your practice? And then, of course, thirdly, is how do we start to do the things related to our jobs that we have cleverly figured out how not to do and still look good? It's true. We have many things that we cleverly don't enjoy, that we've learned how to kind of navigate our way into not doing, but we still look reasonable. So those are our three really big areas, and this is an area that I've had a little bit of expertise in developing starting in the mid-1990s on the back end of a lot of work with people who had incredible competence, incredible learning skills, and yet for some reason there was a gap in their ability to get out of bed, have a future goal or aspiration, and lack the strategies to navigate this kind of frequent and consistent action in that particular direction. So I decided to go take a look at that in quite a serious and rigorous way. The findings were very interesting. They were quite shocking, actually, in the academic community, very counterintuitive. And that work now, I seem to get invited to present and talk about in various types of organizations throughout Australia. Now, before we go there, I just want to give you a little bit of history. Really, it's too long and we're short on time, but there are two pieces, I think, relevant that set the stage for what interests me about this, what I can say about it, and what I can't say about it. Clearly, I'm not Australian. Even an uneducated ear would be able to tell you that I'm from America. But that's a very long time ago. I was raised in the States. I went through high school there. I was an average student. I wanted to be an engineer. That was my goal. And I decided, however, because I didn't like school, that 4 or 6 more years of university, sitting with my feet flat on the floor, taking thousands of hours of notes, was not going to be particularly fun. But I really wanted an education, and at that time the Vietnam War had ended, and they were looking to attract people into the military service from different quarters. So all throughout the poor communities, there were big posters, Uncle Sam wants you, and there was one in my neighborhood, and it said, we want you to be a this, and this engineer. I thought, well, this is it. Move out home, get paid, get my education, life is good. So at 18 years old, I went down, took all my exams. They came back and they said, you've done absolutely fabulous on your exams. However, we don't take women in the engineering field. Would you like to come in and do something else? This is 1973, the end of 73. Would you like to come in and do something else? And I said, well, why don't I not do that? If the laws ever change, why don't you give me a call? As you do at 18. And amazingly, in December of that year, they did call. And they said all of these fields, barring I think there were 4, were now open for women. Would you like to come in? So I ended up being, rather by the luck of my interest and age, to be the first female trained as an engineer in the United States Army, which of course creates a lot of visibility. You can build a whole career being the first something like that. Just that. So I went into school, the whole 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of thing. Now, school was different for me because yes, there was time for listening and lectures and taking notes. But then they'd say, well, now that you've got all that, why don't you get up, there's a computer, tear it apart, put it back together again. I thought, this is it. I can talk out loud. I can break something and put it back together. I can be physically active. Now, for me, that was the key to learning. And some of you may find over the next few days that your learning style is either accommodated or less accommodated. Now, to the degree it's not accommodated, you have to bring then to the table what you need in order to perform well. Because we all learn quite differently, but a presenter can only present how many ways? 1, and hopefully they've chosen the single best way to present that material. Anyway, long story short, I end up graduating. I'm there first thing in the morning, last thing at night. Sorry I'm talking fast, I'm trying to make up time. Like a plane going a little quicker down to Melbourne. I get there, I love it. So I graduate number 1 in my class. How cool is that? First female graduate number 1. They think, where have the women been? That was just a fluke. It really was only a fluke. So for me, graduating number 1, I don't know if you know, but in the military, if you graduate number 1 in your class, you don't get to go do the job. So they do. They have a notion that the single best person in a class will now become the single best what? What do you think? Instructor. There you go. And of course, there's no truth to that whatsoever. But they did send me off for 3 weeks in military instructor school. They did make me a military instructor. And the important thing I want to say here about that, which relates to what we're going to do on performance and leadership, and tying in with what Angus said earlier today, is that I was in this unusual position. I would have been a teacher like every teacher I'd had in my career. That's the only behavior I knew. But I was in the unusual circumstance that my very first class had 40 men. And these were 40 men, all of whom were physically larger than me. They were all older than I was, and they all outranked me. And so when a student would say things like, well, excuse me, Corporal Burns, I'm confused about that, I couldn't say things like, well, had you done your homework? Or if you'd stop talking to your neighbor? Or if you would get here on time? Or under my breath, well, of course, someone like you is going to be confused. You know, how many times as leaders, when we're tasking or communicating, or challenging or moving someone towards something, when they don't perform, our instinct is to do what? Is to blame them. That's just what we do. It's how we get away with it. So I couldn't do that. I would have to come to attention, salute, go to parade rest and say, excuse me, Sergeant, Captain, whatever he was, what specifically did I do to cause your confusion? Try that on for size the next time someone who works for you doesn't perform well. What did I do to cause you to perform so badly? What did I do to cause you to fail to meet your target? it's really interesting that when I would ask that, I would be given information. They would say, I was with you till here and then you threw me off the cliff, or that example didn't work for me, or I'm okay with that, but this is not making much sense, etc. They would give me feedback. So my students, or your employees, or your team members who fail, every time they fail to do something or don't get the best result, all that is feedback for you about the quality of your communication. Because when I then said, with that feedback, here's another example, here's another way, work with you differently, da-da-da-da-da, their confusion went away. So what I realized, like at 19 years old, was that my students, it was not their problem. The problem was my communication. And the more feedback I took and corrections I made, the fewer and fewer mistakes I made when teaching new students coming along. Does that make sense? And you see in leaders, they get better and better and better to the degree that they're open to get that kind of feedback. Now, I'm not saying that other people aren't sometimes responsible for their own results. Of course they are. But as soon as we blame them as a habit, as a way of thinking, then we're out of control. Because if you're at fault, I can't fix you. But if I go, what am I doing that's causing that? Or what could I do to cause something else? Well, now I've got a shot at what? Changing my behavior may change yours. So for me, personal responsibility in everything, be it leadership of others and certainly self-leadership, has been a kind of cornerstone of all the work I've done in education departments and government departments and schools and companies and you name it. It's a foundation that kind of sits how I see the world when I'm operating with other people and trying to accomplish something. Now, there's a 25-year gap now in here, a 20-year gap. I did a lot of teaching, and a lot of that teaching I shifted from engineering, which I'd done with big people like NASA, because when you're the first female and graduate number one, everybody wants association. So I worked with lots and lots of organizations for about 6 years as an engineer. Then slowly my fascination came for human engineering. What is it that causes human beings to do what they do? How do we influence the behavior? How is my behavior influenced by things that are happening around me? And I made a radical shift at about the age of 28 into the human engineering field, and I've been in it ever since. Big focus of that work was re-educating adults in how to learn. Because adults, when they come into a learning environment like this one, typically, without some retraining, will behave the same way they did when they were 6 or 7 years old in school. And that means emotionally as well as strategically. So you read, most average adults in Australia read at about 250 to 300 words per minute. That's the reading speed of a 7 or 8-year-old in Australia. So your reading speed does not improve with age. Your vocabulary improves with age. But yet you have an adult brain that has this incredible capacity to process information. So I wanted to re-educate adults with adult brains to learn more effectively. So I spent most of my career up until maybe my late 30s doing that type of thing. But here's the problem. It's the last thing, then we'll launch into this model. I found this. I was under this hallucination that if you taught people how to learn effectively, and you gave them evidence that that was true, meaning if you choose to do this thing, by evidence you know you will achieve it, that was where I was going, then that's what you would go do, wouldn't you think? Like if you knew for a fact you could not fail in a learning environment or a learning endeavor, do you not think you would just go do it? Do you think? Of course, I mean, people go, yeah, if I knew for a fact I wouldn't fail when I want to learn to fly a helicopter, I'd love to do that. So these are the kind of people I was meeting, and I was teaching them skills at that level. The problem I was having was this. I started doing all kinds of surveys, and what we found was that even though people had, by evidence, the skills necessary, that if utilized would get them where it is they want to go, between 75 and 85% of them, depending on the survey we did, failed to do anything. It was kind of like if you allow adults and give them all the skills and strategies to do whatever it is they want to do, what they're going to do tomorrow when they wake up is nothing. Because they have trouble getting out of bed. or out the door. So if you give them all the money, all the resources, all the skills, all the tools, they will do nothing. Because doing something is just effortful. It's just hard. It's just so easy to not do things. So, I thought this was quite a fascinating thing. When you have numbers like 75 to 85% in these surveys coming back saying, I had a goal, personal, professional goal, to achieve this because it would benefit me in these ways. I had all the time, all the money, all the resources, and I never got there. When you have numbers, though, as big as 75 and 85%, now you know you have a biology problem, not a psychology problem, not a strategy problem. It says, when numbers are that big in my field, that it is more normal for people to avoid action than it is for them to take action, and you have to be extraordinary to engage in certain types of activities. Extraordinary. Now, we like to hallucinate that people who get things done are having fun, or that it's easy. It's not. They're not different. They just have a different set of cognitive strategies that manage this biological imperative to sit down when you don't feel comfortable. So I'm going to give you a little model, and we're going to put it in the context of performance. And then I'm going to give you a little task at your desk to make sure that you understand how it works within your own everyday life. And then we'll come back and try to give you some of the antidotes for that, or the anecdotes for that. So here we go. So when we go out to set some sort of improvement in our practice, we start here, and I apologize for those of you who might not be able to see this. I will have leave these up here or do something with them. We might take some photos and then download them on your app or something, okay? Isn't that cool to say something like that? It's nice to have lived long enough to be able to say something like that, compared to from where I came from in my engineering days. So we start with the sum total of who we are and our capacity for performance. Something compels us. It might be a performance review. It might be something we've identified that we want to be able to do differently or better. And we set some sort of, I hesitate to use the word goal, but some sort of intention, if you will, to move in that kind of direction. So what we're trying to do, whether it's improve a practice or adopt a new one, or simply do things we're not particularly liking and avoiding at the moment, is it's additive. It's not a big thing. It's just we're kind of adding a little bit of capability here. Now, obviously, the number one way to never get into the future with this is to not do nothing. And to be honest with you, that's what a lot of people do. And they sit and they dream and they fantasize. It'd be so lovely to learn how to snowboard. But they've been saying that for 20 years. I teach a lot of music, especially guitar. And it's amazing the numbers of people who, for 20 years, have had that guitar sitting in the closet with an active intention and desire and joyfulness about their desire to play, who never take it out of the closet. So one of the accounting things is we just don't do anything. So in order for us to get there, we have to do something. Now the nature of the doing something looks something like this. We have to go and take frequent and consistent action in the direction of that goal. Frequent and consistent. So, for example, I'm going to use everyday examples because I know you all come from very different businesses. Let's say I wanted to learn how to swim 500 meters. If I only went to the pool like once a month, it's neither frequent or consistent enough to ensure learning. Would I eventually learn? Absolutely, but it would take a long time. But if I were to go 3 times a week, frequently and consistently, and I've got everything I need, clearly I'll eventually learn to swim. So the only thing I really need to achieve any goal is this ability to take frequent and consistent action. The only thing that's or frequent and consistent action, the only thing that varies from human to human in the main, the only thing that varies is the length of time it takes. And the length of time it takes for you to learn to swim 500 meters and correct someone else is past experiences that you had, the quality of your effort, the quality of your learning. So this might be the first day at the pool, second day at the pool, you might do a session in the gym to support it, the next week starting at the pool, etc. So people will learn at varying rates, but no one's not going to get there. So everyone has the capacity to improve that performance. So what starts to happen is this: people set these kind of intentions, they get up, they take no action, don't go anywhere, or they begin to initiate action in the direction of the goal. Now in my case, I did this as a PhD study because it was such a big deal. When we started looking at those 75, 85% numbers, they were mind-blowing. And I knew if I did this commercially, it would have one set of weight, if you will, academic weight. If I did it as a PhD, it would have a different significance. And it would have an opportunity to underpin other research later. And it also meant I had some pretty significant characters looking over my shoulder while I was doing this. So I did this as the PhD. And sure enough, so I take two groups and we put them in. They all have personal, professional goals that are relevant for them. I ensured they had the time, money, spousal support, etc., to ensure that they would do that. The length of time was 3 months. Now that wasn't long enough to get the whole of something done, but 3 months is enough to see a measurable change in their behavior, I'm sure. So that's what we did. And we started them off. Now my job was only to teach them how to create a story or a narrative of their experience before they took the action, their experience while taking an action. What does it feel like to do this thing? And on reflection, what did it feel like? So I was really teaching them simply to write about their experience. That was all I was trying to do. And then I collected those and I analyzed those. The wild thing is in both groups that we had, again, about 82% and 85% failed to achieve their goal, which was interesting. And the other interesting thing about that is those who quit or abandoned that goal pursuit did so between 3 and 6 weeks. It's the real danger time. We get really excited to go back to school. We're really excited to learn how to touch type. We're really excited to do this, and we get started, and something happens in those first few weeks that spiral us down into the point of quitting. Does that make sense? And all of us, probably most of us at some point in time, not with all goals, but certainly with many, have had that kind of process go on to identify it. So even in my own study, they quit. Now, they did continue writing, which is good, and we did have people who completed. So we had this interesting thing that we could look at. Well, here's a few of the things that we found. I kept thinking, what is it that causes people who were so excited, had all the research, I'm not talking excited, but I mean, had the goodwill to get started, enough energy to get started, what would cause them to drop out? So we started analyzing the narratives, and the thing that we found that stood out most was that in the reports that we received, and then we're talking thousands of reports here, in those reports, as many as 95% of the terms used in most reports, language, were negative. Negative. So they used words like boring, frustration, fearful, anxious, not feeling so hot, uncomfortable, unpleasant. The majority of the narratives emotionally were all negative. We also had lots of accounts for negative physical sensations. My back hurts, my wrist was sore, my fingertips are bleeding from playing scales on the guitar. Whatever. Or someone kicked me in the head in the pool. I don't like being cold in the morning when I have to go for a jog. So, can relate. So, negative emotions and negative physical sensations. Now, human beings are really like any other organism. And that is, if you apply a pressure or a tension on them such that they feel bad, they will immediately, without some sort of strategy, without some sort of mental work, they will immediately do something to alleviate that feeling. So if I'm in my Mavis Speak and Typing Tutor program, as one of my subjects was, he's in his Mavis Speak and Typing Tutor, which he loved for the first 3 weeks. He'd write these reports going, she beeps at me and tells me when I make errors, and then I fix those up, and it's like a game to me. I'm watching it, however, it evolve over the next 3 weeks. Because all of a sudden, he's writing, if she beeps at me one more time, the computer's going out the window. Or Mavis just said, angrily, Mavis just said I did 9 words a minute with 14 mistakes, and she's suggesting I go slower. He says, if I go any slower, I will no longer be typing. So that, he didn't, needless to say, didn't get there. Very frustrated. So, as organism, we have this thing that says, if what we're doing doesn't feel good, go do something else. Now, the going and doing something else means what? Stopping doing what we were doing. So, interesting here. If the nature of actions you have to take in order to learn to do something new or improve upon your practice, I mean, you're stretching outside what's normal for you to do something new, your nervous system is going to be stimulated, human beings don't like that feeling. If that is the case, the nature of what you're doing, you will rightfully, naturally, ordinarily try to stop it. And the easiest way for an adult to stop it, because you don't have parents and teachers hanging over your head, is just stop doing the activity. Put it away. Does that make sense to you? If I send you away from here, I promise you, every day you will find 2 or 3 activities in your everyday life that you operate this way on. There'll be 2 or 3 others that you don't like, but you seem to persist with them. The point of today is to try to get you to understand how you're doing that so you're in control. So if it's not feeling good, you will stop. And this is what you could see. As people went on, the worse the feeling got, the harder it got, the more disillusioned they got, the more they felt like they were a failure, that they were never going to learn, that they don't like being kicked, that they feel like they're being embarrassed or humiliated in the class. Boom, they're just out of there. That makes sense to you. So why are they quitting? Because it didn't feel good. So it took me, by the way, 5 years of a lot of hard work. So I could academically finally say, I've been saying it for years. No, it's lucky anybody ever hired me. But eventually I could actually stand up and say, learning is not fun. It's hard, it's arduous. Do you think of anything you've learned of value? Riding a bicycle, to getting your degree, to going to university, to writing a thesis, to writing your first book. It's not fun, it's arduous, it's hard work. We hallucinate that these things are fun for other people. Well, the people who write must love it. They get to stay home, drink coffee, and write books. Ha! You've never tried to write a book then. It's incredibly painful to do these things. So it's just not fun. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't moments of fun in it. It's fun every time you see yourself have a measurable change. You've just done something you never did before. It's a little faster than you ever did it before. You've gotten a better response on a contentious phone call that might have undermined your business in the past. All these small changes can definitely make us feel quite good. But in the main, we have to work at it. We have to work at it because we're asking our nervous system to do something it hasn't done before. It's uncomfortable doing. Does this make sense so far? Okay, just check. All right. Let's see. Oh, we're already up to there. I'm saving time. Yes, I'm succeeding. This is good. So then, the question becomes, if this is the process, there's a few questions here. One, why do people choose goals like this in the first place? If it doesn't really feel good to do them, then why do we persist on selecting them? What do you think drives that kind of thing? What are we thinking about at the time we select the goal? Succeeding. You're thinking about what? Here. You're thinking about the end result. How good is it going to be when I can do this? How good is it going to be when I can save time on my calls? How it is, you think about the end. And that emotional state is what? Is positive. So we have a move toward that. So that's what organisms do. They move toward what feels good, move away from what doesn't feel good. What we don't really do, and what I'm constantly trying to teach adults to do, is what they don't do is they don't think about how's it going to feel like to get there. What's it going to feel like? So for example, if you say, I'm going to go back to university to get certain qualifications, that's good because you can see the qualification, you can see the certificate hanging on your wall, you can see yourself calling your mother saying you finally accomplished it, you get a new job, you'll be able to make more money. So all these positive things, you sign on to school. What you don't think about is, What's it feel like to try to find parking in the evening at Sydney University? It is not fun. And it sounds funny to think people give up on these goals for something as simple as it's hard to find parking, but they do. Or sitting in on a course that has a very boring instructor. Or sitting in on a course where an instructor constantly is calling on you and you don't know the answers and you feel embarrassed or humiliated. Or you haven't written any kind of reports or documentation and since you were a school kid. And if you don't really you're not kind of in the flow of doing that. These things are challenging. Or you're trying to study at home and you have 3 children who are under 5. This is all highly problematic. Now, we say, yeah, but if I think about those problems, I won't even get started. Not true. What will happen is when you think about the nature of it, then when you go to find parking and it's difficult, it doesn't carry the same emotional weight because you're not surprised by that. You're better prepared. You might take public transport. You might carpool with other people. You might set up a separate room for study and choose your study time when your spouse is home to take care of the children. The preparation of knowing what it's going to feel like helps you manage these things and not be upset by the fact. How many times do I hear, I didn't know it was going to be that hard. I didn't know I was going to feel like such a dunce, or I didn't know I was going to feel so uncoordinated. You know you're going to feel uncoordinated for the first 3 months, 6 months playing guitar. It won't bother you. You'll just go, this is what it feels like to be learning. This is what it feels like to be in this situation. And then we find people will start to persist. We still need a few other strategies. So one, we choose it for this. And the other is that preparation does a world of good at getting ourselves prepared. So if you leave this school and you go, I love that idea, I want to incorporate that kind of skill in my practice, then, and you're looking at something that might take 3 or 6 months, the best thing you can do is, yeah, great, get excited about adding it. You can leave this summer school really excited, and I'm sure you've left lots of schools really excited, and then you find nothing really happens. And so, what a waste. When it can easily be managed by doing what? Laying it down frequently, because it's just an action. What's the 3 things each week I'm going to do? Sit down to work my way through, and now I'm not going to think about how I feel about it until June when I wake up and I've got some movement in that direction. Now, there's 2 sides to this whole thing. We have how we feel in the action itself. Then we have what effect does that have on future action. So let's say this. Let's say we're learning how to swim. We go to the pool, we manage ourselves getting there. And we go to the pool, and the first day it's kind of fun. We're in the water, and we've learned how to put our head in and not drown. Yay, success. Then we go to the next time, and we're learning how to do a basic stroke and so on. So we go for a couple of weeks, and everything seems to be going okay. But each time we go, there's also discomfort. You know, there's other people more competent around me. The water's cold. I feel a bit out of sorts. I don't feel like I'm really making any progress, whatever the case may be. Well, as we accumulate experience, lived experience, then in our head, we start to ask questions like, do I feel like going to the pool? Well, to answer the question, do I feel like going to the pool, your brain uses the same circuitry that it has when it's actually doing this activity, and it gives you an idea, and images and sound, and a full kind of motion picture of what it's like at the pool. Now, if the experiences at the pool have been mostly negative, when you ask the question, do I feel like going, and you get the image, the answer is going to be what? No. Now you've got trouble in River City. And now you're going to have to do something to do what? To get out the door. Because you already set yourself up to not want to take the action. So we started teasing out little ideas and strategies that we could see certain people using when they were engaged in this activity. So it affects not only what we're doing, but eventually we'll start talking ourselves out of doing any kind of future action. Does that make sense? Now, is it time for me to ask that question? No, last one. I'm going to have you sit for a moment with your group too. So there's 2 things then we need to be able to do in order to take frequent and consistent action. There's only 2. And these are behaviors. Some of you are really good at this, some of you are not so good at this. If you're not good at this, it's the single most important thing you might learn for any kind of future improvement. 1, you have to learn how to initiate Action, meaning you have to learn how to start. How to start. If you cannot get off the couch and into the kitchen, no food's going to get cooked. Like that initiation, for example, if you're sitting at your desk, you've had an intention of reading a book, a professional book that's going to improve your practice, until you can, how many of you buy books and don't really read them? Any of you do that? You know the average adult in a professional book only reads 11 pages. So a lot of you just lie. So how many of you buy books, how many of you own books you've never actually opened? Good? Yeah, look at this. Like monstrous numbers of people spend 45 or 50 bucks for a book and then don't ever open them at all. So that's called I cannot initiate an action. The ones who get 11 pages can initiate the action, but they can't sustain it for long enough for learning to occur. These are people who get to the pool, get in the water, they were going to do 5 laps, they do 1, and then they figure, oh, this isn't so much fun, get out and go home. So they've done what they got there, they did a little, but they didn't sustain it long enough for there to be any improvement. That makes sense. Initiate, sustaining action are the two things we have to be able to manage in order for us to start looking at any kind of performance improvement. Okay, maybe a little task at your table. You've been in this room a long time today already, and I appreciate that. And clearly there's not time to give you another kind of outside break. So let me see if I can get you with 2 or 3 people at your table just to have a conversation. And what I'd like you to talk about is this. I'd like to know this. What have you successfully learned to avoid? What have you successfully learned how to avoid and still look good? Now, if it feels risky to do that in your career, like I have successfully avoided calling clients, then don't use personal things, okay? Use your personal. I have successfully avoided putting together IKEA shelves, which have been in my garage for the last 4 months. I have successfully avoided putting my wedding photos in an album for the last 7 years. I've successfully, so what have you learned to successfully avoid? It's still there, taken away in the back of your mind, going, needs to get done, needs to get done, needs to get done, it'll get done next week, it'll get done next week. You've been doing this for years. And you have just figured out how not to do that. Second question. What things do you not like doing, but you get them done anyway? So give me a short list of what are some of the things you really don't like to do? Take out the rubbish, take a kiss apart, make those kind of calls, do presentations. What are the things you do not like doing, but they get done anyway? And on from that, how do you do that? How do you do the things you don't like doing? If you can sort that out, just have a thought. Like I said, you can do it on your own, in a minor conversation, 2 to 3 people. You're going to have maybe 7, 8, 9 minutes or so to do that. With that being said, thank you very much. We'll see you shortly.
Maybe not.
Hey, Amy, you've got a roving mic.
Yes.
If I asked a few people to share what their thoughts were, you could do that. Now there's a whole lot you're going to be running. So why don't we do it all? You guys are on tap. Share with me, if you will, some of the things that you've learned to successfully avoid. Actually, we don't even need that, Amy. Let's just, I think if they yell, I'll get them. Just raise a hand so I know who so we don't get 10 at once. What kinds of things, yes, recognizing Don and Doug and Neil are here, knowing that.
Call 89 first.
What are some of the things that we've successfully
Don't
learned
make it
to
up.
avoid? We all have them. What are some of them? Ironing. How long can that go? Your whole life. Even those where you kind of are quite comfortable wearing unironed clothes. I get that. What other things have we successfully learned to avoid?
Washing my car.
washing your car, because you learn that after, like, you know, it's like dusting. You know, after like 3 months, it doesn't grow anymore. So like, it only can get, well, because dirt doesn't stick to dirt, so it can only get so dirty, and then after that, you kind of get that used to that, and then it doesn't get dirtier. So I get it. Okay, washing your car. What other things do we successfully avoid? Family. Yeah, well. I'm sure that's not the only one person who's done that. I mean, we do successfully learn to do what? To manage relationships and minimize certain amounts of attention in order to get other things done. Sometimes it's because we don't, you know, we just don't have time or work's priorities, and it's just because we don't like them. But we do, I mean, I've met men specifically in some industries who have successfully learned to avoid their families, essentially, allowing them to do what they're doing in their career, and still are married and still have children. It's quite a phenomenon to me. So I know we laugh about that, but that is something you can do. And they still seem to grow and stay there. I don't know what that's about. What other things do we successfully avoid? Some, not all of us, but who successfully avoids something interesting?
My 16-year-old daughter.
Your 16-year-old daughter, yes. Well, they reach an age, and then you kind of learn how to just let them get to 18. Right? Without thinking too much about that. It is quite amazing, but we learn to avoid things like food, certain foods, which might be good for us. Don't get into the gym, study, reading, taking courses, making contentious phone calls, calling mom, and, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of other things. And in the end, it feels like I'm able to navigate life quite successfully while avoiding those things. Now, maybe we are successfully, you know, being successful, and maybe the quality of life might be better if we were paying more attention. The game would be to be conscious and mindful about what it is we're avoiding. So it becomes a choice. I'm choosing to not do this because I know it either has no consequence or is something preventable, as opposed to simply, like my students, quit or failed to do something simply because it didn't feel good, but they didn't understand that it was simply an instinct of not feeling good that was driving their behavior. There's no choice in that. That's just being at the effect of your instincts. But we all have lots and lots of things. You know, I heard the interesting line this morning. Someone said, you know, we want to be a 7, but are we really a 4? You know, a lot of people know how to look like 7, but they're really 4. Because the things they need to do to be 7s, they don't do. But nobody knows you're not doing it. When I did this model, came out of the PhD, I did lots of teaching on it. I'll give you the strategies in a moment. Taught the strategies, we made sure they were embedded, we watched them operating, we watched people improve their performance. It was regular as clockwork. These things are things you're already doing. It's just not necessarily, you're just not necessarily in control of them, so you don't apply them where they're most useful. And I had one company, the head of the company come to me and he said, you know, it's really interesting having heard you lecture about this. My belief is that our people spend 100% of their time doing 80% of their job. And so we started to play with the top executives in that company and with their teams. And this was a company and organization where there was a lot of trust, a lot of openness. People were really willing to communicate about all the things that they were successfully sweeping under the carpet and not doing, and no one knew, and they were still employed, and everybody was making money. But when they learned the strategies, and we started to talk about that, and they could see the benefits of actually applying those things, then all of a sudden now there's hidden money, there's hidden profit, there's hidden resources, there's hidden well-being, if you will, as was said earlier today, embedded in our ability to do the things that we otherwise avoid. Because avoidance doesn't actually stop the stress. It still doesn't, when you're not getting something done, like I said, those IKEA shelves, I know that sounds like a simple example, but they do sit there in the back of your mind. They sit there waiting to be done. It's another thing. And so the brain's got to do what? Keep its antenna up. I'll give you a funny one. You probably all do this. Petrol. Are any of you really good when the tank's like at half full, you go get petrol? Your wife is good. That somebody you know then, yes, is good at that. How many of you have a nifty little thing that it gets down to where the light is on? How many of you have the lights on and then you can look at most people? Now the weird thing is, when you get a full tank of petrol, you get this momentary sense of relief because the brain now doesn't have to at all think about. Remember, your brain is designed to do what? To keep you on the planet long enough to produce and survive. That's all it really cares about. All these things it does is only for those purposes. So when you have a full tank of petrol, your brain's antenna on petrol go down. Doesn't need to pay any attention to that. Doesn't need to worry about it. Because it's not likely you're going to run out. But have you noticed that you don't think about petrol until it gets to about halfway? And then all of a sudden we kind of get a consciousness about where the petrol gauge is? Am I related? Yeah. So you kind of get a consciousness that it's there. So the brain's doing what? If my human's not going to likely survive very well or do well if he runs out of petrol, he or she runs out of petrol on the bridge or on the freeway, so I better be alert. Now each time, you go in, you see it's half full, but it's still half full. And if you're not going very far, who cares? So you go home, but notice each day it's the warning bell's a little louder. And then as the tank gets, the gauge gets down, how many of you notice that you start asking the question about getting petrol? Should I get petrol now? And in response to that, you start calculating where you've got to go. You start going, oh, well, I just got to get home and I got to drop Johnny at school tomorrow and then I've got enough. I'll do it tomorrow. How many of you have done that? Yeah, look, human behavior. This is normal. I know. So as the gauge gets down, now the brain starts to do what? It still doesn't want to get petrol. Do you feel like getting petrol? Who feels like getting petrol? You gotta stop, you gotta get a car, it smells bad, you gotta go in, you gotta pay money, there's a line. It's not fun getting petrol. So when you ask the person, do I feel like it, the answer is gonna be what? No, if it calculates that it doesn't have to do it right now. Is this making sense? Okay. So, how do adults, and especially, do this kind of thing? Well, because we have a problem, and this was a problem in the study. How do we tend to feel when we don't do the things we said we would do? We said we were going to start going to the gym and we don't. We said we were going to quit smoking, we don't. We said we're going to do this and we don't. We said we're going to go to school this year, we don't. How do adults, when they fail to do what they said they were going to do, feel about that? Guilt and or any of those associated. They don't feel good self-loathing, they feel like they disappointed themselves, they feel guilt. It's on the low end of that scale. Now that confounds things. So why would, if we're trying to go, okay, well I'm going to not do something that makes me feel bad, but the result of not doing it is going to make me feel bad, well that would kind of blew the whole study. So we found something in the narratives that was very, very interesting. That to alleviate the guilt, adults have a habitual pattern of alleviating the guilt by constructing a story or a narrative called a reason or a rationale or excuse, whatever word you want to use there. To do what? To delay doing it now for later, or to stop doing it because you really never wanted to do it in the first place. Does this make sense? So I can spin a story that when I hear myself say it in my head, it convinces me that it's okay to delay, and I imagine telling it to other people, and they nod with approval. I'm out of the game. So for example, if you were meant to, for example, to let's say get some numbers done or a report done, and it was due the next day, you've been putting it off, it's still not done, you ask yourself, do I feel like doing the report? The answer is no. But listen to what the no is, listen to what you have to do. What am I going to say to my boss tomorrow at 8 o'clock? So you start literally imagining what? Having that conversation. And if what you say you think is going to get okay, listen, I understand, how about tomorrow? For the next day, you're out of there. You will not do it. So justifications, like for example, if you promise your spouse you're going to pick up the dry cleaning, and you're coming home and you do, I feel like getting the dry cleaning, the answer is no, feels like getting dry cleaning. watch what you do. You start spinning a story. What's the story I can tell my spouse about not getting the dry cleaning that if believed gets me off the hook? Some of you have spouses that won't let you off the hook, and then you know to just do what? Go get the dry cleaning. So here's what we run around with, is we run around with a set of emotionally significant scales, and we're constantly weighing them up. If getting the dry cleaning is not fun, then I want to weigh it against what? Telling my spouse I didn't get the thing. If my spouse's reaction is going to be worse than getting it, I'm going to get it. If my spouse's reaction is going to be to let me off the hook, boom, I'm not getting it. It is, and you'll manage action all day, personally and professionally, on these kind of scales. How many of you are really good, you consider yourself 11th hour wonders? Do we have any of you in the room, meaning the closer to the deadline, you really ramp up and then you perform better? How many of you do that? That's so wrong. In some activities, it's true that tension and stress improves performance. Typically not in most things. But what happens is, if I've got something due in 3 weeks, and I ask myself, do I feel like getting started on that? The answer will be no, because we imagine it, but it's when? Way in the future. So then the antenna go down, we don't think about it, but there's a little bing, bing, bing somewhere along the line, and the antenna go up, and says, now we start thinking, oh, I only got 10 days. Nah. And then it's a week, and then slowly. Now what's happening is, as time gets closer, the emotional tension increases, and the consequence of not starting gets big. The scales start to what? Tip. So now the consequence of not starting versus sitting down and doing it has gone out of whack, and that's where you'll kick into speed. Now some of you, that's a day before, or at 11 o'clock at night before. Kids do it with HSC, cramming. It doesn't work like that. The best performances tend to be done a little bit over a long period of time, with time in between for things to saturate. You're going to give a presentation, your preparation should start a month before, not the day before, because your brain doesn't have the capacity to work it well in that way. It's better to do 10 minutes a day just thinking about it, ruminating about it, flitting around about it, taking a few things going, and letting your brain kind of sort itself out for a month, and that's not painful, it's not difficult to do that. Okay, now, last thing then. And I'll see if I can get any questions in, but I'm not sure on timing. We have 3 strategies that were teased out of the study. Let me use that here for a second. Because I did have about 20% of the people did successfully achieve their goal. So the question became, how the heck did they do that? The first thing I did was I asked the people who failed to achieve the goal. I asked them, what do you imagine was different about those people in getting their goal versus you not getting yours, or you're stopping? A lot of them didn't agree that they'd actually failed to achieve the goal. They just weren't doing it. They were just going to do it again in a few months' time. I'm still in communication 13 years later. And still waiting. It's true. So I asked them that, and they had 2 hallucinations. One was that the people who achieved their goal were better people than them somehow. They said, well, yeah, but that guy, is so disciplined, or that woman, she doesn't have children, or, or that one doesn't work full time, and somehow, or, wow, that's the most disciplined person you'd meet, though, So they somehow go, you're better than me. And therefore you get your goals because you're different from me, which of course is a nifty way. If I can convince myself that I'm less than, isn't that a great alleviator of guilt? I never feel the need to feel guilty about not doing anything if I don't make myself feel like I should do anything. And I can't tell you how many successful adults in some part of their life are running this story that they are not good, not smart, not this enough, not that enough, and all I see is that is the quintessential beautiful excuse for never having to feel bad about doing nothing, even though they have the full capability of doing anything that they want to do. So So that's one. Second thing they did, so no evidence for this. Second thing they did was they believed that the other person's goal was easier. So they said, yeah, but if I was trying to reduce my golf handicap, I'm sure that would have been an easier goal than my goal of learning how to touch type. I don't know if you've ever tried to improve a golf handicap. This is not particularly easy to do. Not that I've done it, only that I've heard. So the point is that we tend to look at other people's goals as either being easier or more suitable for them, or just somehow more achievable. What those people didn't have was they didn't have the privilege of reading all the narratives. And what I could say to them was that those people who achieved the goal had as many negative experiences. They had as much frustration, anxiety, fear, etc., etc. No difference between the two. And I really just want to come back. We do tend to look a lot at other people who are high achievers who get things done as somehow better than we are. It just isn't. It is not true that they are having more fun. It is not true that it is easier for them. If I had lots of time with you, I could tell you story after story of working with top musicians, Olympic athletes, etc. They hate what they do. The thing is, they hate it, but they know how to do it anyway. And that's where the strategies come in. How do I not like it, but do it anyway? How do I get this idea that says boredom is not a good enough reason to quit? That discomfort is normal and natural when I'm starting to learn something new. So the three strategies our folks had were these. And they use them, one of the three every single time. And I will suggest this. Everything you do that you don't like doing, everything, you will do one of these three things. They're as consistent as anything cognitively I've ever seen in research. One, because the taking of the action is problematic, meaning initiating and starting it is a problem, especially once we already know what it's going to feel like. One of the strategies that people had was this. They don't think about it. If I think about doing it, or think about how I feel while I'm doing it, I'm doing what? By thinking about it, I'm bringing up the emotion. As soon as the emotion's up, my nervous system, my brain's going to kick in to save me by getting me to do what? Stop. So one way to short circuit the emotion from kicking in is to not think about it. I mean, this is where Nike's line may sound like it was a slogan, but it's probably one of the best things of the last century, and that's this whole just do it. That is absolutely spot on as one of the three ways people engage and get things done. They just don't think about it. And there will be a lot of things that you get done. It can even be like, see, if you're sitting at home on Thursday night and you go, do I feel like taking out the rubbish? Who feels like taking out the rubbish? We don't. So the answer is no, so we wait. And these are the people who run after the truck on Friday morning. So there will be some things that you know to not think about. You just don't think about it. You just what? Get up and do it. Some of you cook dinner every night for your kids because you just don't think about it. If you ask the question, do I feel like getting in the kitchen, and the answer comes, so you just don't ask the question, you just do it. There'll be hundreds of things like that in a day. So strategically, that's a really big one. Second one that we found, and these are all in the narrative, so we could just see every time someone didn't like something, but they did it anyway. This is just what kept coming up in the stories they were telling. They do think, but not in a willy-nilly way. They think very specifically. They think specifically about one of two things. They think specifically about the future. So they don't think about, do I feel like doing it now? They go into the future and they ask questions like, how do I feel when it's done? How do I feel when I put another tick on the box that I've completed another lesson? How will I feel when another semester is complete? They go to the future and they say, how good will I feel at this point? Even like if you go running, some people jog, you know, the first 10 minutes it feels terrible. Or driving to the gym feels terrible and getting warmed up. But they know that once they're there, they get into it, they quite enjoy it. Then they wonder what all the fuss was about. So these people say, you know, how good do I feel when I'm in the gym and I'm warm? How good do I feel 10 minutes into a run? And that'll get them what? At least that would get started for 10 minutes, and then they can judge it from there. Make a decision from there. So they think in positives, how good, but importantly, humans heavily motivated by negatives. How bad will I feel if I don't? One of the successes for those people for whom it was successful of things like Alcoholics Anonymous and smoke enders, etc., was the public declaration. Smoke enders, I think, used to make everybody write a letter to everybody they knew saying they were quitting. And what was effective about that was all of a sudden now starting to smoke again versus calling your mother to say you started again, tip the scales. Does that make sense? So public declaration, this is why, and I know it's very controversial, this whole notion of shame, you know, having somebody wear a placard, and you know, most men in prison that have been interviewed on this topic of shame would rather spend their 10 years in prison than spend 1 year walking outside the shop they robbed with a sign on. Because public scrutiny like that, acknowledgement, is very, very powerful. Doing that will definitely manage this behavior, by the way. But we're in a society that kind of is a bit touchy about this subject at the moment. So they do think either of something more positive or more negative in the future. So that makes sense to you. Like Melinda Gates for Taylor, I used to sprint with her on the same squad. And she was amazing. Coming into the Olympics, I had her lecturing for me one day. They said, somebody asked the question, well, Mel, how is it? Because she mentioned she likes cake, lots of it, and hates training a lot. So they kind of said to her, they said, well, how is it that you just can go for like a year coming into an Olympics and not eat cake? She said, because every time I'm looking at a piece of cake, I'm thinking about the starting blocks in the final of the 200 at the Olympics, and I'm one piece of cake less able to run, or less able to perform. I worked with the Olympic Taekwondo team, same thing. Talk about successfully avoiding. You'd think people wouldn't do that now, would you? Like if you made the Olympic team, wouldn't you think you'd be doing everything? And wouldn't you think you'd like it? No, they hate it. You can't stand it. It's a real pain. They're just really good at it. Funny thing is, they're really good at it. They're the best in the country, and they only do 7 out of 10 things. It's really interesting. Imagine if they did 10 out of 10. Some meeting, the manager calls me. He says, I have a feeling, it's 3 months before the Olympics. He says, I have a feeling some of our kids are not doing all the things they should be doing in order to perform the best that they can on the day. We'd like you to come and have a conversation with them about that. So I did. So I gave them the model. And then I said to them, listen, would you guys grab a sheet? There were 8 of them. I think 6 were there. 8 on the team, 6 were there that day. I said, listen, would you do me a favor? Just grab a pen and a paper and write down all the things you know you should be doing regularly that will affect your performance on the day that you're not doing. Of course, the managers don't think they're going to write anything. 6 heads go, boom, and they start writing. Not getting a massage room, I haven't told my coach that I'm really injured, I ended up doing this, I had a Coke for lunch, I'm not doing that, I'm not getting in the ice bath, no, they're all going down the list. Manager having a heart attack. And I said, that's it, very interesting, we have this, so all those things are things you know that if you did regularly would improve your performance. I said to them, what strategies have you been learning to manage your behavior leading up to the performance? And they say, well, we do a lot of guided visualizations. We see ourselves standing on the podium, performing well on the day. No, we do this as a regular part of our routine. And I said, that's very interesting. I said, is it working? Clearly not. Because actually, I think I'd asked them to write a list of everything they have to do and then put a tick mark by all the ones they weren't doing. That's what was freaking people out. So clearly that wasn't working. I said, well, let's try something else. Can I get you to go to the day after your Olympic performance, see yourself in the village in the little bed that they give you, lying there, reflecting on your performance the day before and how well you did. One of the gals said, are you trying to make us feel guilty? I said, well, if it works. Because no one wanted to see themselves the day after knowing that they had not done everything they could do to know. I mean, you know, who knows how well they perform, but they wanted to know the single best performance that they could have. So even the best of the best of the best of the best, we look at as if, one, they love it, and two, they do everything. They just don't. It's just that they don't have to do, they figured out what don't I have to do, but I can still perform. And there's nobody, no company I've ever worked with, government agency I've worked with, school student I've worked with, who does not have a list of things they know that they can get away with not doing and still be performing. But imagine who you can be if you do. It's quite extraordinary how much extra we can produce when we get on top of these things, on top of these small things that we avoid. Okay. So do think. Last one. Sometimes we're so ingrained with this activity that we don't like doing. Like we've avoided it for so long, it's kind of hard to kick-start it. So do think or don't think, it doesn't work very well. We just kind of can't get it going. If that should happen, the third one we found people doing was this. They called it, or I called it, just start, decide later. Because the big issue for most people is initiating action. It's not sustaining it. I would say 90% of the problems we have with performance behavior and really doing new things is starting. Once human beings start, it's actually easier for us to keep going than it is to change direction again. For example, let's say you're meaning to go to the gym regularly and you just haven't been able to get there. If you commit to just start, now just start might mean I'm going to get in my gear, I'm going to go on, pack my bag, get in the car, and I'm going to drive. If after 10 minutes I don't feel like going to the gym, I'm going to turn around and go home. The funny thing is, if you play the game of just start, I'm going to go as hard as I can for 10 minutes. If after 10 minutes I don't want to go, I'm going to turn around and go home, or I'm going to stop and put it away, I'll tell you what, it's much easier to just keep going than it is to turn around and go home. You say, God, I haven't washed the windows in a year. How much can I do? Just start, 10 minutes. I can get a bucket out, pour the water, get some brush, get a knife, ding, 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 10 minutes. Do I feel like that? No, it's just easier, just boom, and keep the windows going. Do you know how many tasks we avoid that can actually be completed in 10 minutes? But we've been avoiding it for a year. I had a girlfriend who was doing her master's, and she said, you know, I just had this one final piece for the master's. So what are you going to do? She said, oh, it's this thesis, the last bit of this thesis I have to write. It's the last thing I need to do. So how long have you been waiting to get that done? So I finished all my coursework like in 1991, and this is like 1999. So for 8 years, she's been avoiding this one last little piece. But she could. She could get away with it. Why? Because she could say it was nearly done, but it meant she didn't have to actually do it. So this just start, and the game we usually play is for 10 minutes. How much can you do in 10 minutes? If at the end of 10 minutes you don't want to do it, fine. Put it all away. It's okay. Then you play that game. Because what you're teaching your body to do is to what? Initiate action. Every single day I would play, how much can I do in 10 minutes? And feel, so if it's a book you haven't been reading, how much can I read in 10 minutes? Get in, 100% focused, read for 10 minutes, whatever time you want to do it, fine. At least you read for 10 more minutes. And I do this every day until I figured out how to initiate an action, because it is something a lot of us have never been trained. You know, most of this stuff, these strategies will have come from how you were raised with your parents. If, for example, you came home with homework, like math homework, and it was really hard, and you didn't like it, you said, I don't like doing my math homework, it's really hard, and your parents said, oh, I get it, I wasn't good. Just do your easier homework first. Or, even better, in this generation, the parents go to school and see the teacher and say, my son doesn't like doing his math homework, it's too hard. Let me tell you what, your brain's being trained that if it's hard, what do? Stop and go do something else. Some of you would have had parents who, when it was hard, they said, good, let's do that one first. You don't leave the house till that one's done. So you learn what? When it's hard, that's what you do. You sit down and buckle down to get it done. Life gets better when you do all the hard stuff first in the day. And almost every successful top professional I know does all their hard stuff first in the morning. They're highly ritualized. They get up and they get that done, because then the rest of the day it's what? It's all the stuff that they kind of enjoy and they want to do, and it's easier for them to get done. I'm not gonna spend, a long time doing this stuff because the model's big and it's rich and there's a lot. But this is enough, I think, for you to be thinking about. I think in two ways. One, if we look at leadership in a self-leadership way, it's recognizing, it's learning how to recognize the start of the story you're going to tell yourself to get out of doing something you want to do. Because if you can catch the story forming, you'll know you're into self-delusion land. And you can stop that. You can correct that. This takes practice. This, to me, for all the things you want to take away from summer school and be learning to improve your practice or to do some new things, that's all well and good. But if you can't manage your own internal process that leads you to avoiding or procrastinating or delaying or stopping, you can have all the best intentions in the world. Unfortunately, a lot of people do perceive themselves as being weak when they don't do this. They call themselves a procrastinator or that they're lazy. You're not. Someone who lacks that kind of discipline, really all they are is a person who does not what? Possess a strategy to override their natural instinct to not do stuff that they want to do. And someone who has willpower, discipline, those guys that go, yes, 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 they're great. All they are is people who possess a strategy to override the instinct and allow themselves to do the things that they don't really want to do. It's the guy, man, or woman who can say, boredom is not a good enough reason to quit. I should feel afraid. It's the first time I've ever tried this. My performance should decline a little bit because I'm experimenting with some new techniques. The people who can say those things in themselves will persist and will continue and will go on and learn. So that's one way for yourself. And this will be the last thing I'll say here, and that's this. For those of you, because of the position you're in, you may be now seen to be and are leaders for many of the other people who are coming in. There are 800 people who did not hear this lecture today. And to me, this is basic human behavior 101. There's nobody who should leave school not knowing how to manage their own behavior. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world just yet. But here's what I would say. For those of you who are in that position, there's one thing knowing the strategies, but you have to know another reason or another way to help people. One way that we get things done is by, I'll answer this. When you were a school student, why do kids stay in school and actually get homework done and go to school and do that kind of stuff? What do you think motivates an 8-year-old to actually go to school? They have no choice about it, do they? The mom, dad, now there will be the odd 8-year-old who goes, yes, history is today. I don't know too many of them. I don't know too many 8-year-olds. If you said, what do you want to do today? History would be the thing on their list. They don't because they don't have a choice about that. Because they have parents and teachers. And those parents and teachers hold an external tension on them. Meaning the consequence of not going to school is worse than what? Going to school. The consequence of failing the test is bigger than doing the homework. So strategically, leaders in every industry, at every age group, they manage a tension, a positive tension, like a pressure cooker, that keeps just doing what? Just enough tension to keep people not feeling good, but doing it anyway. That's what great teachers do. With my guitar students, that's my job. They hate it for that first 6 months. It's so weird to be that bad at something for so long. And it is. It's a really rough thing to get your head around. But once they break through, they're fine. Now they can manage themselves. My job is to let them know that I know how bad that is. I know what it's like. They can trust me that in a few months this will change. If I hold that kind of tension properly, they don't like it, 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 but guess what? They do it, so that they make that breakthrough. If they don't keep doing it, they'll never get the breakthrough. So you as leaders also have that capacity to play with those emotional scales, making something have a bigger consequence than what it is you're asking them to do. It's not manipulation, it's just good human behavior. This is just how we help people get to the places that they are saying that they want to go, that they are determined to get to. So that's a little bit. Was it understandable? Makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. There is going to be a handout given to you. Okay. I wrote this for you. It covers all of the key points here. that have been done. And it gives you the strategies, a little, and again, different readers. At the back end are two shortened up articles that come off of my website on the subject. So it says kind of the same thing, but in a different way with a different kind of flushing out. I thought those would benefit you as well. This is also written for the 800 people who are not here. So you'll find the language is a little bit kind of familiar and quirky, but I'm really talking to them going, this is what I did. Funny thing is, this is what I said I was doing before I did what I did today. So if you go, no she didn't, know that it's because that's what I thought I was going to do, and then it just didn't happen that way, so don't tell any of them. So that's for you. We're going to see if we can get that to them as a download or some other way as quickly as we can. I have a lot of work through the internet and online, et cetera, stacks of it on the website, Facebook page, et cetera. That's articles, interviews, stuff that's been done for Cisco through webinars, all freely available. Please avail yourself of that. I'm here for the next 2 days. I'm just here to chat and help out wherever I can. So if you see me and you have questions or want to chat about this, please don't hesitate to do that. So that's me, and I'm really, really out of time. So I'm going to thank you and thank you.
That was just great.
Oh, thanks, mate.
No, it was.